what happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is
Here in our new media seat today, we have Jack Posobiec, who joined us in Anchorage, Alaska last week. Jack, thanks for being here. Why don't you kick us off?
Caroline, thanks so much. So a couple of questions regarding the status of these peace talks. Obviously, we saw the President and President Putin there in Anchorage. We saw the world leaders here yesterday with this summit. We've heard phrases like coalition of the willing. We've also heard Article 5-like guarantees. When it comes to the security guarantees, what is the current status of that? I know the President earlier today mentioned boots on the ground would be UK, France, Germany possibly, but unequivocally said no U.S. troops on the ground, but U.S. coordination. Can you elaborate on that, and what would the red lines be?
Sure. Well, you got to the heart of what I was going to say to all of you today on security guarantees, which is the President has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The President understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well.
Caroline, now have the Russians responded at all? I know we spoke with President Putin last night. What has been their response? Because we've heard some reports from the Kremlin and others saying they're unequivocally against NATO troops on the ground.
Well, look, the President continues to have these conversations with both leaders. Those conversations took place in Anchorage, Alaska, again yesterday with the Europeans and President Zelensky, and he has directed his team to come up with a framework for these security guarantees that can be acceptable to help ensure a lasting peace and end this war.
And then just last question real quick on this. Regarding some of the funding, we're hearing questions about another round of weapons sales or possibly a round of U.S. purchases of Ukrainian drones. Will that money be funded by the U.S. taxpayers? Are we finally going to see an end to the U.S. taxpayer-funded, seemingly endless mandate for these foreign wars?
Well, the President is very sensitive to the needs of the American taxpayer, and immediately upon entering office back in January, he made it very clear that we're not going to continue writing blank checks to fund a war very far away, which is why he came up with the very creative solution to have NATO purchase American weaponry because it is the best in the world, and then to backfill the needs of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people and their military. So that's the solution the President has came up with. We'll continue to see that forward. As for any additional sales, I'll have to defer you to the Department of Defense.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition here of Human Events Daily. We are live at the White House. Today is August 19, 2025, Anno Domini. I want to thank Caroline Levitt for allowing me the opportunity to sit in the new media seat earlier today, just a few moments ago, at the White House press briefing, and having that opportunity to ask some very serious questions about what's going on here in the White House and in these discussions, very high-level discussions, high stakes, as President Trump stated earlier, regarding the United States, Russia, Ukraine, and potential security guarantees. One of the things that I really tried to drive home on this was, number one, will U.S. troops be on the ground? President Trump, I know, spoke this morning about that and said unequivocally no U.S. troops on the ground. But at the same time, he mentioned something about U.S. coordination. And so what would that mean? What would that look like? I've talked before about a potential Syrianization of the Ukraine conflict, whereby in NATO forces or coalition forces would come in. That is something that the president spoke about earlier today. And I also questioned Press Secretary Levitt about this. UK, German, French troops, will they be on the ground in Ukraine to provide a sort of security guarantee? And if so, by the way, will the Russians agree to this at all? Because as these conversations go, these are all proposals that do not merit any weight until, of course, they can be agreed to by the Russians. That is the biggest part of it, and the president understands this as well. That's, of course, why he decided to take the time yesterday, cut the meeting early, and then go and get Vladimir Putin himself, the leader of Russia, on the phone to discuss this, in addition to a potential bilateral meeting, a sit-down between Zelensky and Putin directly that would precede a trilateral meeting of the three leaders, President Trump, President Putin, President Zelensky. And of course, the final question that I asked while I was there: will this mean an end to the era of endless U.S. taxpayer-funded mandates for these endless wars overseas? Because the American people, this is something they voted for in 2024. We see it every single day. They keep asking, why, oh, why are we spending tens of billions of dollars on wars all around the world, protecting borders that are not ours, and ones that do not have a direct interest for the American citizen? Of course, we've now seen with this administration deployments to the southern border, deployments of now the U.S. Navy and a task force there in Southcom. That was one of the other topics that came up. This idea of moving back towards a hemispheric defense. And Caroline Leavitt also confirmed that more than likely that money would be coming from either the EU or from Ukraine in some capacity, these EU nations, allowing them, as President Trump has always said, to pay for their own defense. One of the only other questions, if I'd had a chance to ask a fourth question, but that's how it goes in the format of these discussions, I would have potentially brought up this idea that's been floated regarding a UN resolution. Would it be possible for people asking regarding a permanent security framework, would it be possible for a UN Security Council resolution to be brought up enshrining all of these peace deals and security guarantees so that it lasts even long after President Trump is out of office? Jack Posobiec, we're here live at the White House on the grounds. Human Events Daily. Right back. Michael Mills.